During the last episode, we put in an offer on the Fountaine Pajot Saona 47.
Heidi put in an offer on a boat today.
I didn't even ask for any.
Yes, she didn't even ask. She didn't. She didn't.
No, I didn't even ask her.
No. Well, it's survey day. We put in an offer on the FP Saona 47 behind us.
Yes.
And today is the day for the survey and sea trial. Now, we're not going to do a haul out today because we're in Key West and they don't have a place to pull a boat this big out of the water. That's going to happen in Lauderdale, provided everything goes well for today.
Now, as you can see, we are experiencing some rain, and so it may not be the best day in your mind for a survey, but sometimes we don't have a choice, and we kind of have to take dates that they give us for a survey. So hopefully we can figure out everything, and that everything will go well with the inspection and everything that gets done. They'll do a rigging check and all that. So we are really looking forward to it, and hopefully it will clear up some today and it won't be too terribly rainy, and we'll be able to film and show you everything.
Well, we certainly do have some wind, so maybe the sailing portion will be fun.
Yeah, that's
all right.
true.
Well, wish us luck.
This is Jonathan Sands. He is a rigger and a surveyor, which is a bit of a rare combination. We wanted Jonathan because he could certify our potential purchase for both the rigging and the survey. He would also be able to be available for the haul out once the boat was moved over to Fort Lauderdale.
I'm going to send you a link to a Dropbox file, which is going to have all the pictures I took today. The most important part of the report is going to be what's called the findings and recommendations, which is basically it's just a deficiency list. I'm going to reference those images wherever possible. So in the report, there's the findings and recommendations come in 4 different like categories, I guess you could say. There's A findings, which are super critical. It means the mast is going to come down, the boat's going to catch on fire, you know, something really big, or something that really keeps you from using the boat in a significant way. Usually A findings are major issues with the rigging and propane. The next one's going to be double A findings, and that's going to be regulation risk. So that's going to basically, it's for the most part, it's required safety equipment. So it's going to be like flare kits, life jackets, stuff like that. Important, but from your perspective, kind of a who cares, because it can usually all be rectified for about $200. B items are items that really aren't going to result like in anybody like, you know, dying or the boat sinking or anything, but they do affect the usability of the boat. So if we have like a real issue with the steering system, if you have a real issue with an engine, something that I feel like should be corrected before you use the boat, those will generally need to be corrected, either, you know, basically pretty quickly after you take ownership of it. Your insurance company's going to expect that stuff to get replaced, or addressed, I should say, either immediately or within the first 30 days. Everything else is going to go what's called a C category, which is the majority of everything. It's going to be normal wear and tear, it's cosmetic defects, non-critical issues with critical systems, and just non-critical systems that just don't work. For instance, you know, like that air conditioner doesn't work. Should you fix it? Yeah, if you want me to go on the boat, you should. But does the boat work okay without that air conditioner? Yeah, it works just fine. You know, and even like the engines, you know, that engine, does it run a little hot? Yeah, it does, but I mean, it runs fine throughout the majority of the range. You know, you're not going to put it on the pins the whole time. So that's a C item. But if I make it a B item, now you have to fix it like day one. And so it becomes a challenge for you. If I feel like it should be a B or an A, I still put it there. So you're going to see most of the stuff fall in the C's. I think almost everything on here is actually. There's an issue between required safety equipment, which is really not very much, flare kits, life jackets, air horn, that's really about it. Well, that's different. So that's not required. Really? So that's going to be auxiliary safety equipment, which is like all that extra stuff that you don't need or you're not required to have. So I don't really judge for what you should have for that because the sky's the limit, but what is here I do evaluate.
Right.
So like the life raft, it is expired, there's no certification on it. You know, it's here.
Are they expired just because of the food that's in there? It's like
No, so they're required to get recertified every 3 years. Part of what is in there is there's consumables that do expire.
Right.
I don't think it's just because of the food. The other part of it too, you're not required to have one, and you're not really required to have it certified. But
Right.
that's the standard that we use it for. The people that have life rafts are required to have life rafts are commercial. So that stuff is not going to be required. I still look at it, I still tell you that. So there's the findings and recommendations, which is what I'm going to get into here in a second. And then there's everything else. The rest of the report, which is going to be the bulk of it, is going to be super boilerplate, template-y. It's just a long description of the boat. And this stuff, you know, it's good reading material. Your insurance company wants to see it. But if you're looking for the real information, it's going to be the findings and recommendations. And then I also do lump stuff together. So like there's a couple issues offhand, like with the sailing gear. So I'm going to say there's issues with the sailing gear and just put them all together.
Okay.
There's issues with the engine. I'm just going to put them all together.
I'll jot everything down in shorthand
Right.
as well, and I'll send it to you guys. That way you at least have those short notes typed up. But you'll obviously get a full report.
Yeah, sure.
But-
Before did you check the listing that Wiley put out there?
Not yet. I will.
You do that
I
then?
can do it now.
Yeah, you were saying you did at the
no.
end, so I just want to make sure that everything that was in the listing has been.
It's what's included in a boat, so you want to make sure that
Right.
it's included in a boat.
The boat actually is in really good condition. I mean, most of the equipment, there's a few exceptions, but there's very few big things that don't work. Especially for being a boat that's at least partially in charter, the cosmetics are quite good, particularly on the interior. So I would say that they have done a good job with the boat. You know, for a 2018, it's in
Right.
good condition. It's
Yeah.
much closer to a 1-year-old boat, you know, or 1+-year-old boat than it is a 4-year-old boat for sure. There is a little bit of wear, particularly on the countertops. It's normal, particularly on the outside. I think there was some marks on it. You can polish it out.
Oh,
but
The table needs to be refinished.
the varnish is not good on it. Yeah. In the engine compartments, which you guys had mentioned it before, but it's on all these. There's just normal corrosion. It's going to be on basically all the normal pieces. I wouldn't paint stuff. I would spray it down with like WD-40 or like some kind of other corrosion block. Usually, if it's really sticky, it works better. You know, if you paint it, the paint's going to just flake off. The engines are equipped with what's called an MDI box or an MDI controller, and it's this little black box, and it's a go between the engine instruments and start-stop. So the difference in the hours is because one of the MDIs has been replaced. There is still an ongoing issue with the MDIs, so you should be aware of it. They have installed aftermarket start switches on the engines, so if the MDI does fail, you still can't start the engine.
Up at the helm here, we're looking at engine hours, making sure all the instruments work. The radar up, checking the compass, checking everything else that's up here. The throttles on this boat have been replaced, so we'll want to check that out as well. Just the general state of everything.
We've been abandoned.
On the tender, a couple of things on the tender itself, just the upholstery for the cushions really kind of falling apart on it. The bigger issue is the platform. So basically the platform's not coming up, it's sort of catching, and then inherent with that also the lock isn't engaging on the starboard side, which it may or may not engage. But it needs attention, and you really shouldn't be using the boat actively all the time without the lock engaging. Exterior teak in kind of just wood. It's mainly the table and the bow cushions or the bow seats. On the rigging, talked about there's a few things. It's mostly just that, you know, like I said, that annual service we talked about and Wiley called me out on. I do recommend the polishing on it. The winches are also due for service. One of them in particular, I think it was the port side, the inboard winch. It's a little gummy. Generally, it is a good service to do every year or as needed.
And they're due.
We do the suspension on a Ferrari.
You can put a winch. You can take a
Consider
harken back
winch.
together. On the ceiling stuff, the Genoa, the UV strip, particularly near the clew, it's pretty much done for. You can get it restitched and it's already kind of been patched up. It's up to you. It should be resolved, whatever. So you can make a judgment call if you want to, and you can talk to the sailmaker if you just restitch it or if you replace it. There's two things today that I think are okay, but we weren't really able to prove them very well, and I'll explain what that is. The first one was just the solar panel system. The solar panel, two of the panels have small cracks in it, which they probably still work, but just with the atmospheric conditions and everything going on today, I was not able to really get any power transmission off the solar panels, which is not a surprise. again, because the sun wasn't out today and whatever else, I mean, the batteries were fairly full, even though I turned the charger off for like the first 2 hours today. We still never really got enough to get any power transmission on it. The only other thing on it that's just worthy to mention is that when I go back and I look at the last 30-day history, there hasn't been any power transmission off the solar panels the last 30 days either, which that's a little unusual.
What about if it's not left, it's just plugged in on shore power?
Yeah, usually
still
at
see
some point,
yeah.
The charger gets turned off at some point
Power
in the last 30 days.
during
Hurricane. When we do the haul out, I can always recheck it. I would be surprised if they didn't work, but I also don't get, like, I can't tell you, like, with a straight face and say, oh, you know, 100% I'm sure they work. The other one on here, which I do feel worked, was the water maker. I did mess around with the water maker for about 20 minutes or so. Everything powers up and everything appears to work, but I wasn't able to get flow through basically the boost pump on the raw water side. The way this water maker comes, you have to do the installation yourselves, and there's a number of valves, and I'm not exactly sure which way all the valves need to. Now, I kind of opened and closed everything once over. There could be air in the line as well, but in any case, I was not able to get it to actually produce water today, but all the bits and pieces do work. The trampoline does have a hole in it, so I would look at replacing the trampoline. Back on the sailing stuff again, sorry, this is in no order. The sail bag is tearing. It's got some tear spots on the starboard side, and the zipper's starting to go as well. So if you're going to replace the sail bag and the general UV strip is on its way out, you may want to consider doing it at the same time. A couple of the shades are sticking, which you caught. The one that I got the most, and there's a secondary issue with it, was the starboard forward shade, and then also the trim piece around it is all discolored. They are not a maintenance-free item. You know, you do have to caulk them, you have to clean them, and people don't, so you get leaks on them. And then the Ocean Air hatch shade screens are a whole separate issue, and they're really prone to problems. They're really nice, they're really, really problematic, and they're oddly expensive as well.
Okay.
They're as much as the hatches. The starboard side midship cleat is slightly loose. The starboard aft, it's the air conditioner behind the television. It's not working. On the engines, we have the starboard engine is running a little hot. It's basically it didn't overheat, but it is. Essentially, it's overheating.
We had pulled back, it would have kept climbing, and eventually. So it's a slow
exactly.
climb, it didn't stabilize.
Correct. And then the other thing on the starboard engine, so I had mentioned on it when we were talking about it, they've pulled the intercoolers off and they've serviced the intercoolers. However, on the starboard side, they haven't done the heat exchangers in the elbows, what's ultimately probably causing the overheating on the starboard side. On both engines, there's some coolant that's weeped out, so probably both of the intercoolers were leaking coolant at some point. There's a little weep hole. That's not uncommon, but that's probably why they pulled them apart, because I didn't see any active coolant leaking out of the intercooler. However, on the starboard side, there is oil that's leaking out of the weep hole for the intercooler, so more than likely the turbo shaft seal is leaking.
Do you think that's something Franny's capable of doing?
Well, you have to pull the turbo. I guess you'd pull the turbo, send it off to get it rebuilt.
On the windlass, we talked about that. We've got the corrosion at the base of the windlass.
The shaft itself is broken, or bent.
Now, that's not really something, I mean, there are people that can straighten shafts, but...
I mean, in theory, you could probably get like a bearing rebuild kit, new shaft, but by the time you add all those parts up, it's going to be...
Yeah.
And then the labor to pull it apart, and like I see that more as a replacement, and then take the old one and break the old one down for spare parts.
We've got one reef line. There's a small bit of chafe in it. I probably will have a couple other little small things, but that's what I got.
Okay.
In our next episode, we continue with the sea trial and we each get a chance at the helm.
Are your hats secured?
yeah, right.
Boy,
Thanks so much for watching our video, and in the meantime, safe travels.